Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cat's Track. We post an interview with an amazing Canadian each weekday for your daily inspiration. Today, I would like to introduce you to my friend, David Milia. David was born in Hanna, Alberta, and he has 6 siblings. He is a father of 5 children and grandfather of 1. Besides David's loved ones, he's passionate about Christ, energy, and climate. He enjoys enabling behind the scenes, and in particular, enabling future generations to step up and take a role in the future they inherit. David tells me that his passions also get him into a lot of trouble, as he tends not to hold back. And friends, that is what I love about him the most. Please find his full bio attached. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Catherine.
For sure. And now I'd love to hear more about Hanna, Alberta. How did it come that you were born there?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a Spanish passport and a Canadian one, and they both say born in Hanna, Alberta, Canada. And I also have an identity card from Argentina from when I lived there. But to try to condense Hanna, Alberta, my parents, who were born in the early 30s, had to leave Spain. They were part of the non-Franco side, who won the Civil War right before World War II. And my mom was smuggled to Switzerland and grew up learning things in French. And when she met my dad, they both left for South America. They went to Chile and then Argentina. And my mom, speaking French in the 60s, thought Canada would be an ideal place to go. And they applied and were accepted in, and they emigrated up here. And they were sent to Winnipeg. And out of 6 siblings, 4 were born in Spain. My sister was born in Winnipeg. And my dad started investing into gasoline stations from Esso, and he bought one in a little town called Hanna, Alberta. As we were there, my mom went into labor, and I was born there. Now, within a year of that, Franco died, and King of Spain came back in Spain, and my grandparents, who had been locked up, were let go and returned to their position. We were back in Spain. But yeah, Hanna, Alberta, there you go, the home of Nickelback, I often share, because that's what people tell me. Well, you're from Hanna. Oh, you must have grown up because you're about the same age as Nickelback. I'm like, nah, nope. I know their music, I guess, but no, I can't relate anything to Hanna. So if anybody's watching from Hanna, I apologize that one of your sons knows nothing about you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I love it. Thanks for sharing that, David.
You bet.
Are you ready for the questions that we sent your way?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, what's been your greatest challenge in the last few months?
I think I can probably relate to most people in saying that the biggest challenge has been engagement. Most of the focus that I like to do tends to be one-on-one, behind the scenes, talking, collaborating, trying to see if we find common ground, sometimes respectful conflict, to be honest, sometimes disrespectful conflict, if I'm also honest. But really, engagement has been difficult. I think since COVID started, those that are technologically savvy have done fairly well to try to adapt. This has been a key time for introverts and self-reflection. But for someone like me, engagement, where we had set out since our soft launch last year, going out and spreading the word, it's been difficult, particularly when we are looking at a nationwide scope. So things around problems like we might see in our interview today, where Zoom goes down or there's technical issues, are a constant way of life now. We conducted even board meetings this way, and I got to tell you, at least from my perspective, they're not as effective as they tend to be when you're sitting with someone. And then you have different softwares that different groups use. So depending on who you're talking to, they have a preferred software. That's been the biggest thing. The second one has been paying for stuff you don't utilize. We have office space in the downtown core. I go there about once a week, but really there's no imperative to be there. The reason for the space to exist really isn't being utilized, but we're still paying for it. And on a more personal level, it's been fairly difficult to juggle. 4 of my kids are still at home. The back to school period was rough. Having a summer where we don't travel, usually every August we get together with family. That didn't happen this year. And that gap has been very difficult to fill.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Oh, thank you, David.
Hmm.
What about the 3 things that you'd like to share with us today?
Sure. I thought long and hard about that. And to be honest, I'm going to regurgitate a little bit of what I spoke about when I was invited to speak at a strategic retreat for EO here in Calgary. And the intent was that there's a lot of negative, anxious-based sort of environments that have been created since the COVID sort of pandemic started. And we needed to feel optimistic. And I scratched my head to say, well, what is the best thing that I could convey to a group of entrepreneurs who really could look at this as a time of opportunity? And then I said, well, that's how we should look at it. So I remember talking about how we use crisis to drive future opportunity. Now, as part of my educational background, I have a history degree, and I love history. I love reading, as you can see behind me. And so I dug into history to speak to them, and I want to share some of the things that I found fairly quickly. The first thing is that if you remember anything I have to say today, I'll repeat again, that it's how we use crisis to drive future opportunity. I want to relay three important key messages from what I looked into. One was that the historical evidence shows that crisis drives things to be created out of necessity, whereas if the crisis didn't exist, we wouldn't have them. Now, I'll give you some examples of that when we look at things that are way worse than what we're facing today with this COVID crisis, which are things like world wars. Right? Imagine waking up and not knowing if you will survive the day, eat that day, be able to travel, be with family members, et cetera, et cetera. But war has also given us great legacy companies, great legacy innovations, and great things that we enjoy today that had those wars not come to pass, we may not have had. You know, from things that we consume like M&Ms or super glue or Ray-Ban sunglasses or, I don't know, penicillin, that's a good one, or anesthesia when we get operations, all came out of necessity of being able to treat many, many people, or the necessity for a soldier to have a chocolate something in his hand while he's in operations. When we look at non-war related items, things of depression-based eras, and we think of the Great Depression, but there was the Long Depression before it, and it culminated with the Industrial Revolution around the 1890s. That's how we finished the Long Depression, which lasted almost 20 years. So we had things like, you know, the light bulb and the steam turbine and radio. We also had lesser things like ballpoint pens eventually come out of that, or concept during World War I after the Great Depression of helicopters and nylons that we all get to enjoy nowadays. Now, when we look at markets, we've also had a lot of drops in markets, and we experienced that again come March. I hit my stop loss in early March for my investments and pulled about 2/3 of them. When we look at those sell-off periods, except for the recession in 2007, we go back in time, all of them tend to last less than 30 days on average, with the exception of 2007 that lasted about 350 days, almost a year. And all of them had multi-year recoveries and excess of where the losses had come. So when we look at crisis, we can look at it as opportunities both to say what's out there that's necessitated that I wouldn't have done had the crisis not come along. Secondly, what are things that people want to consume from? And third, what can I do during this time that when the crisis ends puts me in a favorable spot? So that was the first thing I wanted to say. Short-term crisis leads to long-term opportunity. Not because I think so, but because the historical data proves it, whether you look for markets or business or recovery. Second thing I wanted to say is that there is a lot of opportunities even right now under COVID. And of course in Canada, I don't think we do quite a good job as perhaps Europeans do or Americans do in analyzing the opportunity and in downturns or in crisis. But McKinsey & Co. looked at COVID since it started, and about a month and a half ago put out a report where they looked at what was going on with regards to opportunity in business if we were to change the lens in which we look at it. And how we look at things really does matter. We can choose to be anxious without being able to control what happens, or we can choose to say, I'll do my best today, and I'll try to be optimistic, to say, what can I do that I couldn't do before, and what shouldn't I do that will just be banging my head against the wall? So when you look at the McKinsey & Co. report, and I'm happy to send it to you should your viewers want to see it as a link, or if you want to disseminate it, I found it very interesting. is that, they had a couple of things that they asked across all the leaders in the United States at the executive level, and they found that most of them will need to find ways to transition to new ways of doing business in the next 5 years. Even if COVID subsides, some of the things that we have found out on how we do business need to change the way we do business. Secondly, that the impact on customers' needs and wants are totally different. Brick and mortar, we already saw declining, but if we saw acceleration of a transition to online purchases and logistics, we definitely saw it during COVID. Less than 21% of US-based leaders think they have the expertise or resources to pursue that new growth under traditional business norms, which means there is the opportunity to change the way we even do business. This might be a nice reset like the Long Depression or during the Deep Depression. And 2 out of 3 executives believe that they're being tested today more than ever before with COVID for their survival. So, and when we look at the gaps then, we're looking at this from the lens of opportunity and look at traditional industry sectors that McKinsey looked at in the United States. They looked at what did innovation and growth look like before COVID under different sectors, and what has happened since COVID started that potentially, if you are an entrepreneur and of a mind that I want to come out of this really strong after COVID ends, right? Which in their report shows a 21% being ahead of your competitors if you do this. The biggest gaps were all outside of pharma and medical supplies, which is where all the innovation is currently occurring. Think, I used to build cars, now I build ventilators, so to speak. Well, that's an innovation, right? So all of that is happening out of necessity, but the other areas that they identified that include materials development, communications, traditional healthcare systems, packaging and goods, financial services, industrial and retail services, all of them are below 30% innovation push since COVID started, which means there's going to be a big gap. So if you're in those industries and you're doing certain activities, what are those activities? And should you be positioning yourself as an opportunity so that you come out stronger when you come out of COVID? So naturally, some of your viewers may want to say, well, what do they recommend we do? Well, McKinsey also laid that out. So I know you're talking to me, but I found this report fascinating, which is why I think it's worthy of dissemination. But they kind of laid out what we are doing and what we should do. And what we're doing should be no surprise. And I'd like to say in Calgary, where I live, most of the executives are probably following this tried and true path. One is, they say most people are shoring up their core business. That is, who are my clients right now? Where are those relationships? Let's keep those strong. We don't want to lose our core business. Secondly, they want to pursue only the opportunities they previously identified pre-COVID, right? So we had a lead here. Let's push and push and push on that lead. Third, let's keep as much cash in our hands as possible so we're not spending. Not that Canadians are known for overspending in the first place. And minimize risk. And finally, sit tight until we have clarity. And McKinsey said that's a mistake when we look at historical trends during crisis that lead to people who will be ahead post-crisis. And they suggested the following things. One, shift your core to meet the new customer. What does that new customer look like? What will they be looking at? Those that can predict that will be in a better position post-COVID. Secondly, identify and quickly adapt your operations for the opportunities created by that changing landscape. So what has COVID done? We're all at home. We're all probably thinking about what really matters to us, right? Where we maybe didn't. We're very busy, but were we as effective or as efficient in that busyness of life? All of this is being looked at the moment. Third, keep innovating in areas where others are not. And if you do that, even though it might mean a capital expenditure, post-COVID, you will be ahead of all your competitors. And historically, that's been proven through other crises. And lastly, you have time right now. Be instrumental with it to build foundation so that the company has that foundation rebuilt in the new era of post-COVID. So that's sort of some of the advice that they gave. They did it in a way that's way more eloquent than I'm trying to tell you in Cole's notes. And they had all kinds of beautiful graphs and pictures and numbers. They're much better than the way that I've tried to convey it. But those are the three things, and they're not mine. But there are three things that when I looked historically are fairly important, I'd say, to the way we can look at things. And I'd like to transition our thinking in COVID, not downplaying how important it is. Because, my brothers, three of which never left Spain ever and stayed there, have really gone through the gauntlet of what COVID is, through shutdowns, through death of people they know, through relating to paramedics that pick up people and triage them to say goodbye to your family because the system is such you'll never see them again. We have been very blessed in Canada to not have to deal with the majority of that. We may have heard through the grapevine or know someone that was affected by COVID, but we have not seen that overwhelming wave hit us. Let's hope that never comes, to be honest. I hope we never face that. But these are three things that when we look at optimism, all things being equal, as we relate to COVID, our risk appetite to do or not do things because of COVID, that if you're a business owner, I want to encourage you to be optimistic, to always look for opportunities and gaps, to not let this overwhelm you, to not let government, anxiousness, the state of what's happening in our province hold you down, but be part of the solution and not be part of that victim group.
I knew you would be positive and optimistic. I love it. I love it. I love it. And wow, what great advice for everyone. Thank you so much for sharing, David. Love the Coles Notes version. And I'd also love the full report if you wouldn't mind. That would be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. May we also include your email address with your profile so that people can reach out to you directly to receive it?
Always.
Thank you. And what about your last piece, the legacy, your what's next for you, whatever you want to share next?
Sure. So this one is probably a bit less businessy and a bit more personal. And of course, I'm not the push my faith in your face type of individual, but I'm a pretty authentic guy in that you can see all my flaws, unfortunately. And so sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, and I'll be the first to say that. I am self-aware of that. But for me, the legacy, it really came from words a mentor told me when I was sort of coming up in the world, so to speak, business-wise. And they pushed me to define what success for me would be, and whether I would be tied to, either money, position, what others thought about that. And I found myself, as I looked back at my activities, really pushing for that, which was climbing the corporate ladder, trying to rule the world, put whatever intelligence I had to manipulating a position that would be of benefit. And when I really came down to it, the ethics and morals that my family instilled in me and my faith trumped all that. And the question that was asked by someone else to me via mentor was, if you were on your deathbed looking back, what will have mattered? And I couldn't answer that. I couldn't answer it was my MBAs. I couldn't answer that it was my position at the time, which seemed enviable for some. Couldn't answer any of that. And it finally came when I envisioned myself on that deathbed, it was people. And I wanted to leave a legacy of people over things. So I come from construction project management, from design and drafting, from documentation controls, and from governance now, and venture capital, business planning type stuff. And to be honest, I've always wanted to be quiet, helping, so that people can live up to the potential, the profile, and from my faith perspective, that God gave them. Sometimes that comes through a bit of tough love. That's not well received, but I do my best to give it in a way that's truly meant to help. Sometimes it comes with just giving time and trying to give confidence to someone that doesn't have it or help build them. The longest walk I've had with an individual has been 12 years. The shortest has been a couple of weeks. And over time, when I've pictured myself at that bed, the amount of people around me is increasing. Where I say, that was a bit of a legacy there, and that was a bit of a legacy there, and that was a bit of a legacy there. So it's no longer stuff, it's no longer wealth accumulation, it's no longer that. And unfortunately, I'm still Catalonian Spanish, So I'm very much of a brute. I fail often to reflect my faith well. I feel I let the boss, which is the only opinion I tend to care about, which is very freeing, but sometimes very negative because I don't hold back. I need to do better in those areas, but that's the legacy that I'm hoping for, to be quite honest. And of course, with my family and my kids, to give them a stable home, to put them in a position to be critical thinkers, to include faith and spirituality in what they do, to invite God into their life, and to put them in a position where I haven't brought them to a religion, but rather brought them to have a relationship with God, and that they decide on that relationship. That's probably the biggest thing. And then following that is to try to do everything as though I'm doing it for the boss, whether that be work or friendships. And like I said, I fail very often to do that.
Aw, you're such a humble leader, so authentic. I am delighted that we're friends. Every time I speak to you, David, I'm inspired.
Hmm.
Mm.
I appreciate that. I hope I don't let you down.
You never have. You're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today on Cat's Track. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Everyone, David Milia, what an amazing child of God. I absolutely love and adore him. He's an amazing person here in Calgary. Many blessings to his family, and thanks again for joining us on Cat's Track. Please like, share, tell all your friends, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.